Welcome, everybody, to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as you know, I talk about 4 different types of freedom: time, financial, location, health freedom. And in that light, I'm always curious, interviewing entrepreneurs, business owners, marketers, doing things on the cutting edge, recording those conversations and sharing it with the world. So today we have Dawn Abbott, and she's going to be talking all about gaining clarity and alignment. It's going to be all about mindset, limiting beliefs, and all about personal development. So I'll let her introduce herself and we'll get right into it. So Dawn, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me and honored to be here. As you mentioned, what I do now is I'm a small business coach, and I use a system called EOS, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And we essentially do 3 things. We help people who have entrepreneurial organizations gain clarity, meaning get out of your head what your vision is, right? Your vision for the future. Who are you? Where are you going? How you're going to get there? And make sure that everyone in the organization understands that as well. And then the second thing is traction, just creating those systems and processes that make entrepreneurial organizations accountable and disciplined so that everybody has metrics and goals they're hitting. And then lastly is working on building cohesive teams within the organization, starting with the leadership team, because if we're honest, most teams are not cohesive. So that is what I do now. My background is that I've owned my own business for 31 years, and I still own that. And through the EOS process, I was kind of moved into the owner's box. And my oldest son now runs that and another company that I started in 2010. So while I am working towards the future full-on transition of those businesses, I am no longer working in them, which I think is one of the purposes and goals I have for other entrepreneurs, is to be able to decide what they want to do every day, and still have a business that provides them the lifestyle they enjoy, right? From a financial and time perspective.
That's the ultimate dream, is, control your time and your freedom. And you could be making $1 million, but just be miserable because you're chained to you can't do anything. You have to, work for that corporation. Interesting thing was one gentleman, he described it as indentured servitude.
Yeah, I think, and I can see that from both working for corporate America and in your own business. Having my career been entrepreneurial, I was very much tied to that sort of indentured servitude, right? In the treadmill, running at full bore, sacrificing majority of the other things in my life besides business, not really having the time or the financial or the fulfillment that I was looking for in what we should, that's what our businesses should provide for us, is those 3 things, right? And I was making all the mistakes that you could possibly make in business and didn't know what I was doing. And I just worked harder to cover up for my lack of knowing how to do this correctly.
Yeah. So what's interesting is you have a very interesting background, and you talk about really talking about limiting beliefs and recognizing them. So tell us about that.
Sure. So the other part of my story is this business that I started in 1991. I started that with my husband, and because I had just had a baby and didn't want to go back to work. And so this was just going to be like a side hustle. And it turned into obviously more than that, and kept growing and became successful. And we started 2 other businesses, because that's what visionary entrepreneurs do, is see shiny things and think of new revenue streams and things like that. And as I said, we worked our lives away and ran that treadmill and just worked harder. And then in 2013, we had both of our boys were 18 and 21. So, looking at that next with these 3 businesses and potential empty nest and those kinds of things, what was going to be next. So we had kind of planned on selling the large business and keeping the other 2 and sort of not running a business together anymore, taking businesses separately. And then I found out I was pregnant, and that's not exactly, what was in the plan for you getting to the end of a marathon. You don't necessarily want to just start a new one. But so our daughter was born in May of 2013. And then 3 months later in August, my husband died in an accident. And so here I was at this place of these 3 businesses, 2 boys in college, and a newborn, right? A 3-month-old. So I didn't have any capacity or bandwidth for worrying about what was going on at the business. Like right at that point during grief and so forth, I didn't care. And I share that just because it's the shock that changed the mindset for me, right? The kind of the life quake. And it was a forced letting go of the vine. I should have let go of the vine, but I was in my business from control and fear and ego, have to be in every process, have to make every decision. And when I stepped away, I realized my team had it, right? They picked up the ball, they ran with it, they were empowered. And so that's why I share that is we can do that in our businesses, having something traumatic happen. And so getting back to your question about limiting beliefs, I ended up on this journey for a couple years of this full-time job of finding myself and really discovering that I had so much baggage from growing up, like we all do, right? There's a 7-year-old scar in every one of us. And that we carry that in all of our interactions and the way we run businesses. And, the limiting belief I had that, my parents worked very hard and never really achieved what you would call the American success. And so that I carried that around with me, that you just have to work hard. You don't have, working smart is not an option, and you might not ever be successful anyway. Right. And so I think that's some of the foundational work that entrepreneurs, once I work with them and we work on kind of all of these external systems, they get to a place where they have time to realize, wait, who am I? Right? and what have I been doing? And what is not working? And that's, again, kind of that forced gift of the trauma that I was given, really discovering what was holding me back and where I was not walking in gratitude oftentimes in my life, complaining about my husband and the business and blah, blah, and, what I wouldn't give to have those problems back kind of thing. And decided I would never spend a moment not walking in gratitude and not looking at myself and how I could be better and where my ownership in all of my interactions and everything that went right or wrong, I have a part in, right? And really discovering that. So
interesting. Which is interesting is when you talk, because you talk about limiting beliefs, and then I can hear some of the heaviness from the past, and we all carry emotional trauma. And what's interesting is you talk about a limiting belief library and understand the stories you've created. Tell us about that.
Right. So I think it's just, it's the example of the one that I just brought up, is that hard work is the way to make it in the world. Right. And so we just work longer and harder. Or there's all kinds of limiting, like when you think of every interaction you have, it's colored by some type, emotion or belief from your past. And so when you walk into a room and you tell your coworker or your boss about a new idea you had, and they sort of brush it off and go, okay, yeah, that sounds great, and walk away, you're triggered, right? And so when you react from that past belief system, because maybe in your family, if people weren't jumping for joy, that meant that, they didn't care, or whatever that belief is. And so when you can take a look at that and stop and reframe it rather than react from it, it can be very powerful in how you go about your life. So in that scenario, you could just react and say, oh, they're going to fire me, or she hates my ideas, or whatever that looks like. And instead say, wait a minute, what is actually true? Maybe I don't know what she was thinking is what the truth is. So maybe I can see, first of all, where is that emotion or that trigger leading me or giving me a sign of what I need to work on, what's going on in me. And then secondly, now I can react and behave and have an interaction from a different place, right? From a smarter place of truth of, okay, rather than freaking out and assuming the worst and start looking for another job, I could just give her a call and see what she thought, or I can just assume it's fine until I hear otherwise, right? Like, so much better than just our innate reaction that come from all these pieces of our pie that are from previous experiences and beliefs.
And
they can, there's two sides, right? So that belief of, if people aren't super excited and giving me accolades, then they must not like me. That can also be very, very empowering, right? So my work ethic, for instance, I see that as a huge benefit, right? That part of the belief is very empowering because I'm willing to work and put in the effort and go the extra mile. And it can hold me back, making me believe that I must work hard and I must load trucks by myself and work overnight and do ridiculous things. Or I could just be smart about it, and choose to not work hard and just make some different decisions and find people who want to do that with me. So that's the flip side of those beliefs, is they can be very empowering. And so you can use them for that, but you have to get to know them first, right? Read the book.
It's quite interesting because there's a book like Byron, sounds like what you're talking about is Byron Katie. Every time I get triggered, when I get into these negative emotional states, like these stories is like, these, and it's like, you're just constantly triggered by these stories. But then like, if you switch to like gratitude or abundance, and then your stories change, which is quite, it's fascinating. So, it's really interesting how we create our own trauma and our own dysfunction. We're actually in the way of our actual progress. We actually need to just get out of our own way, but let our true selves do the work. So
right. Yeah, I've always found that, like, if I can just go back and discover where that belief came from, like the first is understanding and recognizing the trigger, which, like I said, is like, okay, so that obviously is telling me something about some belief I have. But where do I think I got that? Like, was that conversation with my mom when I was 9? Or was that, and then once I can go, oh, I get it, and understand where it came from, then I can just make it go away. Right. I can just go, okay, that's actually not true. And when I see that, I can remind myself, remember, that's not true. You made that up when you were 9 and not capable of seeing the logic here.
And also tell us more, like, guiding decisions from a place of strength. What sort of decision-making process or kind of mental framework can entrepreneurs or people owning their own businesses zoom out to, eliminate the external factors and then guiding their decisions from a place of strength?
Sure. I think from, there's the internal factors, right? And then I think making decisions in an entrepreneurial world requires that we have some of those processes and systems, that we develop through the EOS process. And, I often see visionary entrepreneurs who spend a lot of time running their business on gut, or, from a physician standpoint, I don't think they teach you a lot about running a business in medical school, right? And so you're running a business with a doctor's mindset, right? And so having the right tools to run your business from actual facts and, having a scorecard where you're keeping all of the important metrics that are leading measure, the activity-based things that you can do to make your business grow or your practice grow, instead of running it from this place of like gut. And I'm all for gut, right? There's something for that. But also we need to be really empowered and informed as business owners and have this empowered lens or filter in which we make decisions. And so we first of all have to know what our core values are, who we are, where we put a stake in the ground, and we would rather not take the biggest client if it doesn't allow us to be aligned with those values, and what our purpose, cause, and passion is, why we're on this planet, and what we are very best at and passionate about. Where those two things intersect is our focus, right? And when we start doing those things, and then we bring in the tactical stuff of having numbers and metrics and goals, now decisions just become easy, right? This place of strength is, I know exactly what my mission is and what I need to push forward and when I'm not aligned. And I can look at the numbers, and now it's just, instead of ooh, what should I do here? It's okay, if this doesn't move my mission forward and allow me to be aligned or allow me to use my strengths in the best way, then I'm out. Right.
Yeah.
Instead of that, seeing shiny things and making decisions from gut. And I don't know, what is a doctor supposed to do in terms of growing their practice?
Yeah.
Let's, get into who you are and your strengths and find the right people to surround you. And
yeah.
Does that answer that question? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, really interesting. And then tell us more about, your company and how people can find you, follow you, connect with you.
Sure. So Abbott Coach, my last name, which is 2 B's, 2 T's, ABBOTT, Coach. And on there, on the website, I do DISC workshops, 5 behaviors of cohesive team, workshops and assessments. I do some keynote speaking. And then my EOS practice is where I help entrepreneurial organizations that are 10 to 200 employees and ready to be open and honest and dig in and have their business grow, as well as my new book that will be out in January called Your Life is Not Your To-Do List. All that can be found on that website.
Yeah.
So you can book a discovery call with me and see how I can help you in your business.
Yeah. And for all the audience out there listening, it's been a great conversation. Be sure to check out Dawn's resources, which will be in the LinkedIn show notes. Be sure to follow her on LinkedIn, Facebook, and check out her website. And with that, thanks so much for coming on to the podcast. And it's been a great conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you.